Hi everyone, this is Ram Martinez. So I'm going to talk to you about the entity dashboards for indirect cost. Now, if you're going to look at the composition of the dashboards, there's this part on indirect costs at the very last few sets of the sheets. For this slide, also going to talk about slightly on the core performance because the core performance is actually part of the calculation for indirect exchange cost. So recap. Um, Product sustainability, uh, it has three levels: 0, 1, and 2. So 0 is basically if your product cannot sustain itself. 1 is if your product can sustain itself by covering direct costs. And 2, if the product would be able to sustain the direct costs plus indirect exchange cost that is calculated. The ratio and profit will also is also created the formula based on the levels as well, but we want to focus more on here, indirect exchange costs. Now the scope of the calculation is that the duration of data profit loss accounts will based on 12 months because the indirect exchange cost will only be applied to sustainability levels because the indirect costs is are always what do you call this are always fluctuating. Not all of them are being spent every single month, so it's better to have them part of the sustainability levels instead. The calculation of 12 months data, you already know this. There's 80-19 executed, 90-20 executed, and 90-20 budgeted. If you want to learn more about this, please go to the sustainability level video and G slide so that to recap it. Or yeah, you can go to either guide or video. Indirect exchange cost formula. So what is the formula? So in order to know what would be the indirect exchange cost to be allocated to total to the product, this is the formula. So core performance of entity times total indirect cost times the one third of percentage direct exchange revenue by product, one third of percentage direct exchange cost by product, and one third percentage of approvals by product. So why are we going with this formula? First off, why core performance of entity? And of course, you already know the total indirect cost is because we want to know the total indirect cost, right? So, but why these other two? Why not just put everything, just allocate it on all of the products? Core performance of entity is here as to be able to split how much the indirect costs would be allocated for the products and how much would be indirect costs allocated to the non-exchange. So the reason why is because as an entity, we don't necessarily operate every single thing towards the products. We know that we generate other revenues as well, and by using the core performance to be part of this formula, we would be able to know how are all of the revenue sources that we use be able to support the entire entity. How will be the conference events would be able to at least support the entity sustainability that can that where you can allocate some indirect cost to those type of revenues. How much would be the product revenue should be able to absorb indirect exchange costs in order to be able to say that we are sustainable and operating on a good significant level in the products. So those are the type of questions that needed to be answered, and the core performance of entity is there to be able to know how much of the total indirect costs would be allocated towards exchange alone, towards the overall exchange. Now, why this percentage contribution? And also, as you can see, percentage contribution is here, the formula is here, which is amount of the product divided by total amount of all products. So why direct exchange revenue, direct exchange costs, and approvals are here? The reason for this is the reason for this is because we want to have a more holistic holistic contribution on how much would be allocated to different products, because you cannot say that just using direct revenue where some products have low direct revenue and then very high direct costs or like very high approvals. There are basically different scenarios that could happen in terms of how much products actually contributed to the operations holistically. So the best thing to do here is basically just average these three types of percentage contribution, and then from those numbers you would be able to understand how much would actually be allocated for the for the product in terms of indirect exchange cost. Yeah. So total, in as mentioned, core performance is the formula. Direct divided by total. Total indirect cost is all of the non-exchange. Yeah. Core performance. So this is core performance. Trends is, I'm not gonna go through all of this one because you already know you already know this from the previous slide. But we're only going to focus on the entity part here. So indirect cost totals. So this is actually the monthly indirect cost contribution table and graph. So basically, this will show you a visualization on how much the how much is actually being used per account per month, and depending on 1920 executed, 1920 budgeted, and 1819 executed. This is only based on monthly, so you can see which peaks, which month are you pretty much in danger with. But for the calculation of indirect exchange costs, we are using the 12 months totals so that it's going to be more holistic in terms of checking everything out, in terms of calculating product sustainability as well. Product contribution, as already mentioned earlier, what is the reasons behind this? Is basically to have a more holistic allocation for each product. But this one, you got tables here just to know how much is actually allocated, how much is a product is contributing for direct revenue, direct costs, and approvals. So if you're going to total this one entire month, they should total as 100%. Calculating indirect exchange costs. So first part, you will see this indirect cost contribution. So this is actually already has the results of everything. So which has the breakdown of total 12 months indirect costs, breakdown of per products. There's also the non-exchange cost just to show how much would actually be put for non-exchange costs. But we don't use the non-exchange cost for product sustainability at all because we would just want to focus on the product sustainability. Then next part is indirect cost graph. So this is just to have a better visualization how much would actually be allocated to different products in terms of indirect exchange cost. Yeah. Then now let's go moving forward for the formula. So indirect exchange cost contribution, it has both the contribution and percentage contribution of 12-month indirect exchange cost. This shows the calculation and how is the percentage contribution multiplied by total indirect cost. Now, just to break this graph table even further, so there's going to be a zoomed version, okay? So first part, the first three rows are all of this part of the formula, which is the 1/3 of percentage direct exchange revenue, 1/3 of percentage direct exchange costs, and 1/3 of percentage approvals. The other part of the formula is core performance, which is this row. So if you're going to add all of the percentage contribution of the product times the core performance, it would be indirect exchange cost percentage contribution for IGV, and then these are the formula. So 41.26 times the sum of these three equals 6.01, which is this one in blue. Now, as you can see, remember you got the result of 6.01. There is another table which is percentage contribution table, and you will be able to find the result here. Depending on which month and depending on which product type of data and product. Yeah, and then you can basically see how they are all being divided. Yeah. So if you're going to look at it, so how are these tables actually relates to? So if you're going to look, first part is core performance, which is 56 point. For example, for this part, 56.84. If you're going to add all of the ones in the products from IGV up to OGE, they should have a total of 56.84. Meanwhile, the last one is non-exchange, so meaning that is non-core performance, so that would be 43.16%. Yeah. So that is basically how this table is working. Again, the one for indirect non-exchange costs is just simply for provided but not be used for product sustainability. Now moving forward, so you remember this table earlier, this one, and then remember this table as well in terms of the breakdown of the 12-month indirect costs. So imagine 6.01, the one that we already got the results before, times the total indirect costs, which is from the previous first table. So 706,730.31 times 6.01% will be equal to 42,459.54, which is these two, which are shown as where you can see the results on both types of tables. And then this would of course apply to other products as well and would also apply to other types of data. Yeah, as mentioned, all this content would be applied to each products and total products. So from there, each indirect exchange cost will be applied to each product sustainability. And if they are applied to each product sustainability, just go to the sustainability slide, and then you can see what would be the results in the sustainability trends. Now the next slide would be how to use the Entity Finance Health dashboard, which is to connect everything together to make it easier. If you watch every single slide video since the first one until to this one, and then before going to the last video or uh, to the next video, then good for you. If you went to the next video already, and then you assume, I would assume that you already know the other content and descriptions that was provided from the other videos. Again, thank you so much for listening and see you on the next video.